In this video, we're going to talk about how to object to an argument. Now, you may be surprised to discover that there's only two ways to object to an argument. Now, the first way is that you can object to one of the argument's premises. The other way to object to an argument is to object to the form of the argument, and this is the same as saying that the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. So, what does this mean? Well, let's look at an argument from last week. All fish swim. All sharks are fish, so all sharks swim. Well, remember that this has the following form. All B's are C's. All A's are B's, so all A's are C's. And we'll also remember that this is a valid argument. So, where can we object to this argument if what we need to do is object to one of its premises? Well, maybe we could object to the first premise. Is it true that all fish swim? I don't know. What do you think? Well, here's our friend. This is a red-lipped batfish. It lives off the Galapagos Islands, and rather than swimming, this fish walks with its pectoral fins across the ocean floor. And walks is in quotation marks there because apparently it's a little bit more of a stagger than a nice, even walk. And this information is according to the Professional Association of Diving Instructors, so I'm going to trust that they're not tricking us. But what's going on? Remember, when a deductive argument is valid, if its premises are true, then its conclusion has to be true. But if you can show that one of the premises is false, then the argument doesn't work right. Notice that this isn't the same as saying that the conclusion of the argument is false. It's possible to show an argument is faulty even if the conclusion of the argument is true. However, once you've shown that one of the premises is false, even if the conclusion is still true, the argument, it doesn't work right unless you change something about it. So what can we change about our shark and fish argument in light of our fish that doesn't swim? Well, we could try something like this. All fish except the red-lipped batfish swim. All sharks are fish. No sharks are the red-lipped batfish. And so, all sharks swim. Okay, well, this gets us to where we want to go, I suppose. Although, we may want to keep in mind that this might be a premise that could cause us problems in the future. Now, what about objecting to the form of an argument? Well, remember this argument that we saw last week. If Jones stands in the heavy rain without an umbrella, then Jones will get wet. Jones is wet, so Jones was standing in the heavy rain without an umbrella. Now, remember the form of this argument. If P, then Q. Q, so P. And hopefully we all also remember that this is a logical fallacy of affirming the consequent. So it's an invalid argument. Even though it may seem like the reasoning is good, the reasoning isn't good because the form of the argument doesn't work. All right, so let's look at the argument again when we're objecting to the form of it. If Jones stands in the heavy rain without an umbrella, then Jones will get wet. Jones is wet, so Jones was standing in the heavy rain without an umbrella. What does it mean to object to the form of an argument? Well, we can object to the form of this argument by claiming that the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. Remember that there are many different reasons why Jones can be wet rather than just because he's standing in a heavy rain. Maybe I sprayed him with a hose and that's why he's wet. But notice that all of the premises in this argument could very well be true. It's the form of the argument that causes the problem here. It's an invalid form. So it doesn't follow from the conclusion, doesn't follow from the premises. Now, one more thing I want you to remember. You can't object to an argument simply by objecting to its conclusion. Now, this might be a surprise, but let's think about it a little bit. We'll go back to our argument. All fish swim. All sharks are fish. So all sharks swim. Now, you're not properly objecting to this argument, even if you come up with an example of a shark that doesn't swim. An example of a shark that doesn't swim would certainly suggest that there's something wrong with the reasoning in the argument. But when we object to an argument, what we're trying to do is show what the problem is with the reasoning. Now, why does this point about not simply being able to object to the conclusion of an argument matter? Well, here's one reason. In our class, we're going to be looking at arguments with conclusions like God exists, and also other conclusions like God doesn't exist. We're going to look at some arguments with the conclusion that we treat animals ethically, and other arguments with the conclusion that we don't treat animals ethically. You can't simply object to the conclusion. You must object to the argument in one of the two ways that I've shown. Now remember, there are only two ways to object to an argument. One way is to object to the argument's premises. In this case, to object, you provide an argument for why the premise that you're objecting to is not true, or by explaining what's wrong with it. The other way you can object to an argument is to object to the form of the argument. This is the same as saying that the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. In this case, you explain what's wrong with the form of the argument, or why the conclusion doesn't follow from its premises. And remember, you can't object to an argument simply by objecting to its conclusion.